It's not your job to alleviate others' emotional discomfort. It's not your job to fill awkward silences, laugh at others' bad jokes, or agree with others' opinions. It's not your job to sacrifice your own integrity to make others comfortable. By Frontline Therapists. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey. Hey, everybody, welcome to Tuesday's episode of the Toy Talks podcast. My name is, of course, Toya Washington. Guys, I'm very, 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 very tired. Heavy on the very. You see, Clubhouse is the ghetto. And I reside in the ghetto. Actually, no, I'm actually where the money resides. But I really am enjoying certain things about Clubhouse now. And it's off the back of a room that I was in yesterday where people were basically exposing Instagram hairstylists. Yeah, yes. There are some hairstylists, and not all of them, some of them that are just crazy. And we spend a lot of money on our hair, on our wigs, on our mane. And actually, it was quite a refreshing room. And I tell you the reason why. Hairstylists who truly, I believe, do a good job, but were hearing themselves being criticized, actually came up, some of them, to defend themselves. Others deactivated their Instagram or deactivated comments on their Instagram. They really did something in that room. And the room's called, I think it's Talks by Ash. And I really enjoyed it yesterday. So it was going on until like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't log off. I just couldn't. And it got to a point where the room was full. It wasn't even admitting people anymore. Yesterday, we really listened. And on Wednesday, Talks by Ash is doing another Clubhouse room. She's hosting another room talking about makeup artists. And me, I'm running to that room at 7 p.m. because I'm planning my wedding. And I will be using makeup artists. Shabi, I will be using them. And now, so I must go and hear what needs to be heard. And I just want people to bring their receipts because we need to see picture. Because when she was hosting the room about the hair, we saw heavy dancing. Some people are actually razzed. And what I've realized and what I've come to appreciate is the pandemic is really allowing people to, I think people are going through a lot, but in terms of businesses, I think this pandemic is allowing all of us the opportunity to spend some time with ourselves, rightly or wrongly. And Clubhouse, I think, has legs and is gathering pace in terms of popularity because we're all at home. I don't actually think it will be as popular if, what is normal. But you know what I mean? If we wasn't in a lockdown, if we wasn't in a pandemic, I actually question how popular Clubhouse would be because it's an investment of time. And a lot of us, we don't have a lot of time, but we do now because of the circumstances. But big shout out to Talks by Ash because I really, really enjoyed that room. Those of you who follow me, have been following me for a long time, will know, we do this, we be this on Toya Talks. Like, we keep it real, advising, guiding Black women how to navigate the world of work and light up the path of their success. That's what we do. We give it straight and real, no chaser, using life experiences and understanding, acknowledging that no one person knows everything. And whilst I've been able to navigate the world of work successfully and safely, it hasn't always been like that. And I hosted a Clubhouse room last week, Friday. And a couple of things I want to touch on is that, first of all, despite what people perceive of my personality, because people think, oh, Toy is really, really confident. I'm an ambivert. I tell people my personality trait is an ambivert. It's like I'm half introvert, half extrovert. And it means that somewhere like Clubhouse actually plays on my anxiety. And I think part of it is because there are rooms that are really, really toxic. You'll find the gems in rooms, like the one that I did yesterday. But a lot of the rooms are quite toxic. And I think it plays on my anxiety. And actually, it is actually nervousness as well. Like you're talking and it's weird. It's just it's odd, and it's the evolution of social media actually. And so I was in a before I hosted my room. I was actually motivated to host a room because during last week there was actually a room for Black professionals, and the moderators were just talking a pile of just shit. They were talking shit as they were advising people about navigating the world of work, but we're doing it so poorly that people were actually like thinking that the confidence and boldness of the bullshit that was coming out of people was actually the true fact. And I was livid. And actually, there was a young lady that actually joined the room and went on stage and was talking, and she was basically talking about people's mindsets, and it's easy to blame racist white people and the white construct, but also it's about how we can use this construct to navigate within it if we just know how. And the way they shouted on this girl, and I just couldn't go on stage. I was like, I can't do this. Like, it's just, I felt very anxious. And I think part of it is because I'm so passionate also about Black women and navigating the world of work, that I couldn't trust myself to not lose it with these people and say, you know what you guys are saying is complete trash, when in fact that wouldn't have been the right approach, because actually there's people in our audience that genuinely don't even know who I am, and I don't want their first introduction to me being hotting up the moderators. But it got to a point where the way they were hotting up this young lady, I felt like because the girl actually follows me and follows a platform, and it got to a point I realized, you know what, and I started posting on my Instagram, and she saw it, and I was like, you know what, if she mentions my name, then I know she needs to tap me in. And she did in the room. She goes, there was a woman called Toya, and she's trying to get into the trying to speak, but you guys have turned hand raising off, because at a point I was trying to raise my hand, they turned the hand raising off, and they allowed me to speak, and I started off by letting that young lady know that I support her, because the way they were trying to attack her was just not normal to me anyway, especially if someone has a different opinion to you. You don't have to launch into them. Anyway, I digress. So I took the opportunity to, share a couple of my thoughts, very high level. And then I thought, you know what? The level of bullshit in this room, I'm going to have to host the room myself. And I picked the young lady that was actually trying to talk, and they attacked her in the room. I made her one of the moderators in my room on the Friday, and then one of my good friends, Bimpei, as well, and we moderated a room where I basically debunked a lot of the bullshit that was discussed in the other Clubhouse room that week, and had a really healthy conversation. And actually some people who had never heard of the Toy Talks platform were introduced to it, and it was just really nice to have. And I would say Clubhouse is not a safe space, but for me, in my room, I told everybody as I reset the room several times, it's about creating a healthy space, a healthy, honest space to have conversation. And it really was that. I know there was a lot of people, when I announced that I was going to host a Clubhouse room, people asked me to record it for the podcast, but the reality is it just wasn't practical, and I did think to do that. But equally as well, people are coming there to have, honest conversation and things like that. And without getting everybody's permission who joined the room, I didn't think it was the right way to record everybody's voices. It's quite intrusive to do it that way. And I know people do that and post it on Twitter, but that's not what I'm about. Anyway, so there were a few things in my Clubhouse room that I want to bring to the podcast and debunk. And then I want to go into some dilemmas, because I've had quite a few dilemmas, and I recognise that it's been a while since I've dedicated an episode to dilemmas, so we're going to do that today. So in that Black professionals room that was hosted in the week, where they were chatting bullshit, the guy said he said to people that with his chest, he was wrong, confident and strong in his bullshit. He said to people there's a 2-year rule. And effectively what he means by that is there's a 2-year rule in which you have to stay in a company for 2 years before moving. Otherwise, companies look down their nose at you. And I just want to bring it to the podcast and tell you guys that that's a bunch of bullshit. Yeah? There are some industries that length of service is intrinsic to that industry, right? So there's certain financial industries. So if you're a trader or if you're an investment banker, sometimes it's the passage of time that is very much ingrained into the fabric of that industry, which is fair enough. But that is a niche. But on average, I don't stay in a company longer than 18 months. And I personally, and that's for me personally, and it's never affected me getting another job. And whenever somebody asks me why did I move jobs, I'm really honest. I say, listen, for me, it's about spreading my wings and my knowledge far and wide, and not actually allowing myself to be pigeonholed into a certain sector that then renders me incapable of pivoting from other sectors and transferring some of my skills and broadening my knowledge. So for me, it's 18 months. And even as a contractor, as fellow contractors know, on a very good contract, you can get a contract for 12 months. Others you can get 6, and sometimes it's 3 months, and that's just the nature of contracting. So I don't think that needs much explanation. But I haven't always been a contractor. I have been a permie, I have been FTC, which is a fixed term contract, and of course a contractor. So for me, I've never been in any organisation 18 months, longer than 18 months, apart from one role where I was there for about 3.5 years. But that was quite early on in my career. And I want people to understand that as long as you can articulate a structured approach to why you have left an organisation, or your view on how you've project managed your career to that point, I don't think there's anything like a 2-year rule. I mean, if I was hiring someone, the fact that they'd been somewhere for less than 2 years isn't enough for me to not hire them. And I think we just need to apply our pragmatic and reasonable hats here. If somebody's every month got a new job, or every 3 months from job to job to job, fair enough, that shows a pattern of behaviour and a lack of commitment. But you know, there is no such thing as a 2-year rule. Now, I don't want people to handcuff themselves to jobs because they think that there is a rule that doesn't exist. It's a myth, okay? Unless, as I caveated before, that, you know, length of service is very much entrenched into the fabric of a particular area of work. But, you know, for the most part, you know, 18 months, I've just never had that issue. I've had more of a question about, you know, oh my God, you know, you've gone to law school, you've done your LLB, you've gone to law school, you've got your masters. Do you want to be a lawyer? And I had that for years, and it was actually quite exhausting. But again, because I have structured my career and project managed my career in a certain way, I don't get asked that anymore. I think it's very clear from my educational background, which includes my level 4 diploma in SIPS, and soon to embark on another course, and obviously the organisations I've worked, which has spanned from public and private and third sector, that actually I'm not only a career contractor, but I'm a career commercial contract manager, and that is very much reminiscent in my CV. So I don't have that issue, and it's also about how you present your CV, and this is the reason why I have the CV masterclass on the toytalks.com website. Every single person who has bought the masterclass, the CV masterclass, and then reached out to me has only ever said great and positive things about how the CV masterclass has transformed the way in which they present their career and how they interact then with potential employers and agencies. And honestly, I pour my industry secrets. I also want to just kind of touch on another topic as well, because quite early on in the Toy Talks journey, I was asked to do a lot of mentoring. Oh, can I send you my CV and things like that? Not so much anymore, but I just want to say something. I can't sit here and tell you guys to project manage your career and to take charge of your career, and then I say to you, right, send me your CV and I'll have a look at it and I'll update it for you, or I'll be a CV, you know, I'm not that person. For me, if you're going to own something, you have to own it end to end, and that includes your CV. Yeah, your career is yours and so is your CV. I want you to understand the importance of your CV. It is the first impression that is created before someone's even met you. Okay, this is an opportunity for you to showcase what you can bring to that organization in that particular role. So you have to own that. I can't own that for you. When you take the time to really, you know, embrace and project manage and take the time to process your career and what you want to do, you learn to appreciate the importance of your CV. And therefore, when you are then asked about your CV, it's easy to kind of discuss it because you've spent enough time with it, you've done the CV masterclass, you've collected the templates that come with the CV masterclass, you've really gotten to grips and understanding your CV, how it's laid out, what you want to kind of display, and what you want to communicate. And to me, that can only happen if you own that. And that's why I don't do any kind of CV coaching or, you know, one-to-one sessions. I don't do that. You know, part of it is also is a time thing, but more like 95% of the reason is if I do your CV for you, I own it, you don't. You then benefit from what is on the CV, but you're not passionate enough about it because you didn't have to construct it. And for me, the construction of your CV is the construction of your career. If you project manage your career in the right way, the first attempt at constructing your career is your CV. So I think we need to take pride in what that means. And I think those of you who know that you need to kind of spend some time with your CV and maybe don't even know where to start, because I used to really not like updating my CV until I realized that there was a knack to it, until I understood that you don't, you update your CV every quarter. That's what you're supposed to do. But I don't want to spill any tips on the podcast. Go ahead and purchase the Toya Talks CV Masterclass, and you honestly won't regret it. And even for me, I updated my CV recently, and it was actually an enjoyable task, because as I'm working and doing my day job, I always take notes, like on post-it notes, of what I'm doing. I think to myself, right, I've never done this before. This is a skill I've learned. And by the end of the week, I've got literally maybe 5 to 6 post-it notes, and I make sure I transfer that information onto my CV when I'm ready to do like a quarterly review. And that's just a little tip that I use. But yeah, now I love updating my CV. I love the way it looks. I love the fact that I'm able to communicate quite effectively what an asset I am and how unique my skill set is, and actually making me feel like a bad bee, understanding that it's what the CV does, and it's turning those speculative conversations into an invite to interview, and then hopefully a job offer. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of quickly mention that as well. There was also conversation about pregnancy and risk assessments and things like that in that Clubhouse meeting, which it was a joke, because people just, the things that people were saying, like it's a legal requirement that your employer does a risk assessment if you're pregnant, which is bullshit. You have to request one. And, on my Clubhouse, I made it very clear that, when it comes to pregnancy and maternity, I've always been advisory, right? I've always played an advisory position, advising businesses about how to manage, members of staff and employees who are pregnant and how to do the risk assessment. So I know about it. I understand it. But obviously, as I'm embarking on that side of, that chapter of my life, I'm educating myself on maternity, on pregnancy and things like that. So what I have promised is that I am going to do a pregnancy and maternity masterclass on the toytalks.com website. And I know it's going to help many people. So I'm definitely, all that information, all that experience and all the new information that I've pulled together, I will be presenting it in a masterclass. But I just want to let you guys know, very high level, that you have to request a risk assessment, right? And you don't have to attend to the place of work until the risk assessment is done. As part of the request for a risk assessment, you can ask that the report is sent to you with the findings, with a clear date of implementation of, the outcome of that risk assessment. And as part of that, you can also ask them for their pregnancy and maternity policy, and make it really clear that you want to have adequate time off. If you have morning sickness, if you have to go to antenatal classes, you can put that in a constructive format. And again, with my masterclasses, whenever there's an opportunity to provide templates, I do so, and I will be providing the same on the pregnancy and maternity masterclass, which should be coming in the next few months. So look out for that if you think that would be of benefit and interest to you. Something that was really, really clear to me in the Clubhouse that I witnessed, because after witnessing it, I had to then create my own. But the one I witnessed is how low the self-esteem is among Black people. And I would say primarily with Black women. Upon realising that, it made me also appreciate the importance of the Toy Talks platform. And it motivated me to keep going, that the Lord's work isn't done. And actually, there's many people who have no idea that the Toy Talks podcast exists and the Toy Talks platform exists. And my job isn't done until Black women everywhere are aware that there is a platform and tool for us to be able to have healthy conversations, and for me to give you guys the advice I believe that you'll benefit from in your career, to actually make your career and your experiences in the workplace easier than what it is now. And I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to solve all and every of your work problems, but I can create or help you and advise you to create a safe enough environment for you to navigate in such a way that you can achieve your goals. And success is attainable for us. We can be successful
black women in 9 to 5s. The reality is not, it's not really 9 to 5. We work late. But the point I'm making is it is possible to be successful in the world of work, but we need to normalize also being happy at work. It's not something that's normalized. And I guess it's also about understanding what about a workplace would make us happy. For a long time, I believed that there was a perfect job. I always believed that perfection in a job existed. And as I went from one job to another, I realized every organization has its own type of politics, and every organization has its own problems. And it's about knowing what my plan is for that particular organization. Especially over the last 10 years, I'd say I haven't taken a job just for the sake of it, because the jobs you take for the sake of it are usually the jobs I had more problems with, if that makes sense. But the jobs that I took to be strategic, especially when I was on a journey of my career path, once I had achieved my objectives, no, once I knew what my objectives were, I was able to understand how to navigate. And once my objectives had been achieved, I knew when to leave. And it's twofold, right? Because some people don't know when it's time to leave, and some people go into the world of work and are lost because they never went in with a plan. And you think the plan's going to come from your line manager, because your line manager, who you've built up to be this all-knowing, all-seeing, suddenly lets you down and disappoints you when they're not who they were at interview stage. And I definitely feel as though we need to reset some of our expectations on the world of work, and reset our expectations on some of our managers. Yeah, we have to. I mean, season 1, Dear Black Women, Your Manager is Not the Key to Your Success. Go ahead and have a listen. The key to your success is you, but you have to make a choice to want to be successful in whatever you do. And I need to debunk something else as well. You know, people talk about the corporate world, the corporate world, the corporate world. This platform is not just for people in the corporate world, because I'm not in the corporate world now. Do you understand? I spent 5.5 years in the corporate world, and I realized it wasn't for me. It wasn't. I'm not. Do you know what? I'm not the type of person. If you see me in person, you know I don't wear suits and all that. It chokes me out, like that top button. I don't know what enemy or who I've offended. I can't. Yeah, I don't like suits. It's just not who I am. I do like the soft rough shirts. You know, that's kind of my bag. But the corporate world and everything that it embodied was just not for me. And I knew that. And when I knew that and I realized that, I knew then, okay, what I was looking for and what my personality could tolerate. I understood where the balance was and what I needed to do in order to set the plan in motion of what I wanted to do with my career. So I just kind of wanted to say that this platform is for anybody who is in the world of work, irrespective of the sector, irrespective of your pay grades and pay packet, irrespective of if it's the corporate world. It's for the people in the public, private and third sector as well. Because at the end of the day, what people don't realise is it doesn't matter whether it's the corporate world or the world of work or wherever it is. The politics and the devils and the white constructs that seek to oppress black women are prevalent in every area of people's working life. So we can't now just kind of segment where or who or, you know, we talk to. And I always say the reason why I speak to black women is because our experiences are different, okay? And we know our experiences are different because we know how we're treated and seen, and we understand the difficulties of navigating work as black women in predominantly white spaces, where in the pecking order, even when with black men, they see us as at the bottom. Yeah, so I talk about being constantly underestimated and turn it into a superpower, and that works for me. But let me not shy away from the fact that it isn't nice to feel invisible in a workplace because you're a black and a woman and a black woman together. It's not easy. And even, you know, a recent contract of mine where I shared this in my clubhouse room that I hosted, where for days I was in these meetings and they would talk to each other, not even acknowledge me. They'd say hello to each other, not even acknowledge me, to a point where they were giving commercial advice, which sits with me, to each other because they didn't even deem me worthy of the role that I was in and the situation I was in to provide them that advice. And then I got to a point and I realized, because it made me uncomfortable, because it was a deliberate attempt to make me understand who was the boss, and they wanted me to understand that, and they were wielding and using their white privilege in that situation and many other situations to basically use it as a weapon. But then I know, because I'm highly underestimated as a black woman in the workplace, that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way to use your voice. And I sent an email and I said to them, thank you for the meeting that we had and the several meetings we had before today, where, you know, we were discussing XYZ and you were exchanging your commercial advice to each other. However, I want to give you my professional commercial opinion in regards to XYZ situation. Commercially, these are the risks, these are the mitigations, and these are the things to consider. And even the way I did the email, they didn't know what to do. I know they didn't. And one of them came back to me, and there was about 5 or 6 of them in the meeting. And only one of them responded. And for me, it wasn't about whether they responded or not. It's about letting them know that I can assert myself in other ways. I know exactly what they're doing, and I'm going to stay true to who I am, because I deserve to be here, because I've made the sacrifices, I've worked hard. I haven't had a gold spoon, silver spoon, I haven't even had plastic spoons, right? I've had to graft to get where I am. So I'm not going to make any apologies or give any explanations to why I sit here. I'm here because I deserve to be. I did the sacrifices. Because some of these people that we're in offices with, some of them don't even have a common GCSE to rub together. White privilege has almost been like a passport to accelerate people in their career. And as black people and as a black woman, we don't have that pass. We don't have that. So yes, a lot of us understand that we have to make a lot more sacrifices, and some of that comes in education. Sometimes it's through length of service to get to where we are. Not for then people who are in white dominated spaces and these people to think that they can treat us how they like. You have to find a way to have a voice, and knowing when to use that voice. Because I could have used my voice in that meeting. I thought to myself, no, there is a pattern of behaviour here. And in order for me to call it out properly, I need to create an audit trail to prove that actually I have provided my commercial expertise. Because if something went wrong, they'll be like, yeah, but Toya was in the room. Really? Because you've been treating me like Casper all this time. So I was also covering my back as well. But on the note of covering the back, in that Raz Clubhouse room, one guy was saying, oh, you've got to write everything down. You've got to tell HR, you know, all this stuff. He was talking shit. And he's like, you've got to write everything down. I'm like, what do you bloody mean by that? You're writing your autobiography. No, you don't write everything down. You create an audit trail, right? And you are allowed to print. Like, people don't understand, like, you can print. You know, one guy was saying, yeah, because, you know, everything that you use of theirs is their intellectual property. Yeah, to an extent, he's right. But actually, if you create an audit trail, that's in the system. It's undisputed. Do you understand? It's irrefutable. But when you're writing things down, it's still your opinion. It's still your view. It's still your interpretation. But when you put it in an email, yes, it's still the interpretation and the view, but you give somebody the opportunity to refute. And when they don't respond to your email, it's not for want of not receiving it. It shows that they've deliberately not tried to engage. Do you understand? You can print. Do you know how many times I've had to print certain things? Go in my sent items to prove that I've sent it. Create that audit trail. But more importantly, covering your own back and knowing how to do it. I realise that some people don't understand that there is a skill in being able to keep a job. It's a skill. And not a lot of us have those skills. And I shared within my Clubhouse meeting room that in my early years, in my early 20s, it was difficult for me to hold a job because I hadn't developed an understanding of conflict resolution, because I hadn't learnt that in my home. And I've discussed several times the tempestuous relationship between me and my mother. But because I was incapable of understanding how to deal with conflict resolution, when I went into the world of work and I went into the office in my early 20s especially, I couldn't hold down a job because I always thought that I was in Hollyoaks or EastEnders. So everything was very dramatic. Even my resignations, they were like, doom, 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 doom. And then I'll pick my bag and walk out. And the way I'll be strutting, thinking to myself, Toya, all you're doing is strutting towards the job centre. Do you understand? So I acknowledge that a lot of people just don't know how to deal with some of those difficult situations, and it's really easy to say, oh, it's a white dominated industry, but we know all of this. This is not new information. So clearly what needs to change is our approach and how we adapt and how we kind of use the policies and the constructs of a lot of these white dominated industries and workplaces to our advantage. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, there are going to be people you work with who are racist, who deliberately attempt and who deliberately do to disrupt your progression, to try and discredit you, to be passive aggressive, macro aggressions. But I have podcast episodes for each of those things. They're there. So I can tell when somebody's asking me how to resolve something, but they haven't invested in a platform that I've created for us. How are you going to come in my DMs and ask me, how do you navigate microaggressions? I mean, come on, you tell me, oh, Toya, I listened to all your episodes. Well, you missed that one, babe. Because I don't just talk about microaggressions, I talk about macroaggressions as well. So I do think that we need to really start, and I know it's hard, especially when you're working in toxic environments, because it's a balancing act between the toxicity and your mental health, and I understand that, and I agree, yeah? But you do realise that until we understand and develop a good understanding and strategy of conflict resolution, we're going to always find ourselves repeating the same things every organisation we go to. Because in my early 20s, that was happening. It would always end in the same way, because I wasn't willing to take responsibility for my lack of conflict resolution and my lack of a developed understanding of the white constructs I was working in. And until I was prepared to do that, I wouldn't be able to hold a job down. Because holding a job down is a skill, and not everybody has it. And holding down a job isn't kissing your manager's ass and being the yes person, the tea and coffee lady. That isn't it. Holding a job down isn't being the butt of every joke. Being able to hold down a job isn't the ability to accept disgrace and humiliation as part and parcel of you being part of the team. That's not how you hold a job down. It comes from being strategic on how you navigate work, setting boundaries, doing your due diligence, but more importantly, understanding and seeing things as they are occurring, as they're about to happen. You should be able to have done your due diligence to a point where you can start seeing patterns of behavior with people and knowing how to kind of navigate those things to get what you want. It's also a skill once you've now mastered holding down a job, knowing when to leave. Do you know how many jobs I stayed in because I really liked the people I worked with? But my ministry was completed in that workplace. I was just there hanging around like a bloody bad smell. So I think it's important for us to start being strategic. And it's a word I use all the time. And it's a word I'm going to continue to use until we learn the art of strategy in our careers. I also want to say something that kept coming up in that Clubhouse room, and I want to talk about it here. Is, some girl came on and she said, there was two girls actually, and one said, not everybody wants to be an activist at work. Yeah? Not everybody wants to be the loud activist at work. And it's funny because, number one, it's not about activism. And number two, you don't have to be loud to make a point. I'm not loud at work. No, I'm a very much a collaborative team player who gets the job done and excels working independently and delivering. That's who I am. But if you can't be an advocate for yourself, I promise you, the world of work will crush you. It is the jungle. So anyone who says, "Oh, I'm not part of the office politics. I'm just here to earn my bag and leave," that's how I know that you don't understand how to survive in a workplace. Because as soon as you sign that employment contract, babes, yeah, and as soon as you enter there first day, you're part of the office politics because you become part of the fabric of that organisation. So like it or lump it, It comes a point where you're going to have to learn how to survive there. And work is surviving. God damn. It's surviving, because if we're saying holding on to a job is a skill, then it's a survival skill too. It is. It is. But being successful in an organization is a choice. It's a choice that you have to make. And you have to define what that success in that organization looks like to you. There was a young lady in that Wayward Clubhouse group that was basically, she was talking and she said, you know, I quit my job today. Yeah, I couldn't take it anymore, and it was affecting my mental health, and everybody was clapping for her. Literally, everyone's clapping for her that was on stage. Well done, your mental health comes first. You know, this is what, you know, if this is what you needed to do, you do it. And all I kept thinking is, that's not the right approach. We need to be, since she decided to share that, we need to be her covering and interrogate what she deems as an attack on her mental health. Because when it comes to mental health, y'all know I do not play with my mental health. I don't, because it's literally all I have. And once people start tap dancing on your mental health, you got to ask yourself a couple of questions. But I definitely feel as though people are pressured and people feel a certain stress at work. Rather than being strategic, it's easy to say, actually, you know, this is my mental health, and we walk away. Because walking is easier than sometimes dealing with the issue. And don't get me wrong, do not get me twisted here. Yeah, when I say to you, if something attacks your mental health and the fabric of your well-being, then making a decision to leave makes sense. But you have to police yourself and ask yourself, is this really an attack on my mental health, or is this me walking away for peace and quiet? Because I don't want to have to deal with this stress, or I don't want to have to deal with, you know, the ag or the aggro. You know, you have to be able to find that balance. So while everybody was clapping, people were like, yeah, you're going to get a job. Don't worry, you're going to get a job. And I'm thinking to myself, this girl's walked herself right into her flipping job seekers allowance. She's walked herself right into a job centre. And people are falsely telling her, you'll get a job. We're in a fucking pandemic. For the first time in my entire career, I'm sitting here saying to people, it's probably safer being in the third sector or the public sector right now. The private sector is looking very shaky. It's looking very, very shaky. You might find the odd gems. I found the odd gems in organisations that have done, you know, have been able to kind of sustain the pandemic, like in the tech industry and the financial sector, and I say pockets of the financial sector. But for the most part, the private sector is looking hungry. So let's not pretend, just because the press are not reporting, that the employment rate is very, very high. And part of that is, for every one job, there may have been 2 or 3 applicants. Now there's about 10 to 15. So while everybody's clapping for her and she's feeling good in the moment, when your money and your savings start drying up, when you are end of the month and you ain't getting that bank alert, and this is the problem with that room. Because rather than asking her what led her to make that decision, and maybe even interrogating some of the things that she spoke about and giving her practical tools, people were giving her whimsical fantasy. And my thing is, every single time people engage on the Toy Talks platform, I need to be able to give practical tools and practical skills. Because once you give people that and you arm them with that, they're able to use it, proactively use it. But when you sell people fantasies and dreams, they will wake up and they will realize that what you've put them through is a nightmare. So when you lure people into false insecurity by clapping for them, knowing full well that you haven't been their conscience and you haven't assisted them so that the next time they won't find themselves in that position, or they could put things in place to mitigate it, all you're doing is setting that person up to repeat the same situation again. And that's all I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, you guys, I've told you before, like, I've had roles where I'd be working 10, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes 2 a.m. in the morning, and that's not healthy. And the pressure, and I get that. And once you sound the alarm and people are not listening and you make the decision to leave, great. My father always used to tell me it's easy to find a job when you're in a job. And I actually believe that. That's true. But sometimes that's not always people's reality. And where that isn't people's reality, You need to be, if you leave a role, your conscience you need to be sure that that's what you want to do. That your conscience won't regret it in 2 months' time when you're looking for a job and you're getting all these job rejections. You have to be okay with that. And don't get it twisted. I've left jobs before with no jobs to go to. But now I realise that if I'm going to be strategic in my career, there has to be exception for me to do things like that. It has to be at a high exception. So that if it does take me a longer while to leave a job, I won't look back in regret. Because regret is horrible. Regret is horrible because you know that you could have changed that and you chose not to. Regret is, I hate regret. A life filled of regret is tougher. So that's kind of what I want to say on that. And I guess I want to kind of end this segment by letting you guys know it's not every battle that is your destiny to fight. Not every battle is your destiny to fight. Sometimes you have to allow people that you work with to show a pattern of behaviour before you decide to act. And I don't actually see it as a battle. I don't look at the interactions and the navigating of work as a battle. I don't. I see it as I've previously said, I have an objective. I need to achieve this objective. And if anyone stands in the way of this objective, I need to be able to, number one, have done my due diligence to see them coming. Number two, understand people's drivers. Number three, work out how I'm going to navigate this obstacle to get what I want. And number four, once I've gotten what I want, what does the next stage look like? So I definitely think it's about knowing which battles. And I'll give you an example. So on a contract of an organisation I was working at, and my reporting line is the director, right? So I start this new place and they've got a project manager working at this organisation who I would be working quite closely with. Then he decides to put one-to-one meetings in my diary. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but the last time I checked, you have one-to-ones with your line manager, right? But this project manager isn't my line manager. He just assumes that he has the right to because he was there before me. And I've done my due diligence on him. I know his drivers. His contract is ending in a month's time. He feels as though effectively I would do him out of a job, if you want me to be honest, because a lot of his deliverables, once they're delivered, you know, the next stage is the commercial contract management, right? So really, his role does become quite redundant. But in a commercial space where there's hardly any jobs, that's not kind of what he's willing to do. So he's given me the big speech, we need to work collaboratively together, kept hammering on about this. And I was like, why do you keep saying this? Like, what is it about? And then when I started to understand that his contract was coming to an end, because one thing with Oyibo people, they love to spill their guts. They'll spill it and you just be there quiet. And at the end of the conversation, they'll realise, they'll be like, oh, we haven't spoken much about yourself. Well, you haven't given me a breathing space to do it. But the power of doing that due diligence is then understanding people's drivers and levers. Anyway, and then I thought, you know, I'm not doing that battle because I don't need to do those one-to-ones with this person. But they're doing it because they're trying to let me know that they're in charge. You ain't in charge of me. But I don't need to have that battle. My actual direct line manager puts one-to-one meetings bi-weekly. So I thought, okay. I had a meeting with her. I says, oh, I just want to let you know that Simon's also put one-to-one meetings. I was a bit confused because I thought in terms of reporting line, I report to you. But then if Simon's putting these in, do I report to him? And it got her back up. Got her back up. Tell me why I looked in my diary, then one-to-ones with Simon were gone. I don't need to fight that. I don't need to fight that battle. She can fight it. Because one thing I know since doing my due diligence is my boss lets her feel like the boss. So I feel like I do the boss babe. Be the boss babe and boss him, baby. Yeah. And I know the conversation probably was like, oh, I've seen you put one-to-one in Toya's diary, but she reports to me, so the bi-weekly ones are with me. If you want to have ad hoc meetings with her, that's fine. But let's not put it as a one-to-one daily cadence. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, but it doesn't need to come from me. And she's not going to tell him it came from me. And even if she does, I'm doing Mrs. Innocent. I'm just, we're just talking. But I don't need to take on that battle with Simon. my boss could do that. And I'ma still smile at Simon's face. I'ma still log on. I'ma still be on Teams smiling in his face, goddamn face. And I learned that from working in and amongst white constructs and knowing that that's how they navigate. Do you understand? So picking your battles are hugely important, because to what end? What are you trying to get out of this quote unquote battle? I hate battle. I hate that word because it's almost like confrontational. And yeah, sometimes work is confrontational. But for me, I can't work in that environment that where it's constantly confrontational. And when I say I can't work in that environment, it challenges me to find peace in that confrontation. Unless it's over and above me, then that's different. But it is a lot of ego. And I understand that when we are working in places where they're not used to seeing black women in certain positions, it attacks their ego in silence. It does, because then it will come up in other ways, where they ignore you in meetings, where they don't acknowledge you, don't call you by your name. You know, I've been through all of that. And, you know, there is a time and a place, and, you know, we'll discuss it on the podcast episodes, but it's important that I spoke about these couple of topics, and a few of them, you know, from the clubhouse. And I just wanted to reassure everybody that the Toy Talks platform ain't going nowhere. So far as there is a need, I will provide. So now we're going to move on to the dilemmas. You guys know, if you have any dilemmas, you can email hello@toytalks.com. In the subject box, just write dilemma. Keep it short, sweet, punchy, straight to the point. Remembering also that it's not just your dilemma I'll be reading. There are other people who have dilemmas. So we need to make sure that we give enough time to read the dilemmas and to respond. So let's start with the first dilemma. Hi Toya, hope you're well. First of all, thank you for your good work on the podcast, helping us a lot. I've been struggling to get into my career in finance due to a lack of experience, as I'm currently working in a completely different field, but I'm determined to get myself in the finance sector in 2021, God willing. I've got a BA in accounting and finance and currently studying my ACCA. I slacked a bit after having my baby on my goals and continued with the work I'm in due to the convenience. I'm a support worker specialising in young children. I would like some guidance and advice, please, on how to move from job sectors. And I know the finance field is very competitive, but ready to put in the hard work. Currently purchased the CV Masterclass today, and I'm grateful that you're passing on this knowledge to us. Kind regards. So the first thing that you've done, which I think is amazing, is you have put yourself in a situation where you're not just saying you want to be in the finance sector, but you're actually being proactive. So you've done your ACCA, you've done your BA in accounting and finance. It is an opportunity. So now you're looking for an opportunity where you can switch industries. And what I'm going to say to you is, if you really embody that CV masterclass and present your CV in the right way, you'll get a job opportunity in finance. You just need one person to take a chance on you. And what I'm going to say to you is, you said that you're a support worker specialising in young children, but that organisation that you probably work in has a finance division. Have a conversation with somebody there. Ask them, how did you get into this? What advice could you give me? Sometimes the advice is where we are. Maybe where we are isn't where we want to be, but the knowledge is there. Do you understand? And I think that if you present your CV in the right way, you can start having conversation. I think the bit that you're worried about is that you say you have a lack of experience, but nobody was born into the roles that they have now. Somebody took a chance in them and they gained experience. And I'm going to tell you that I wasn't dropped, into experience. Somebody took a chance in me, but they took a chance in me because my CV was presented in a certain way. And remember, I started, before I got into my career, I was working in retail. I'd done retail for a while, but to make the transition from retail into my career, I, like you, had the academics. I just need someone to take a chance, but my CV really was a strength. I think also as well, employment agencies. I've got a podcast about managing employment agencies because they need to be managed because some of them are wayward. But sometimes I find it's easy to pivot into another field or sector using a employment agency. And it is fierce. It is fierce because of the current commercial climate. And yeah, it is competitive, but most industries are competitive, and that shouldn't kind of talk you out of being able to pivot. So I would say, first and foremost, the CV Masterclass comes with 2 templates. If you listen to all the advice I give you and the industry secrets in relation to the CV and present your CV in the right way, and I would say approach employment agencies, see what agencies specialize in finance sector roles. And the CV Masterclass, it's not just about CVs. I talk about how to do job application forms. So the public sector have specific job applications, and I actually tell you how to apply for roles in the public sector and private sector applications as well. So I would say don't pigeonhole yourself in terms of whether it's public and private sector. There are roles out there, whilst I caveat that because I know there's a lot of people applying. I think it's about how you position your CV. In the organisation you're working in, there is a finance department. I know this because you get paid. So where there's pay, there's money. Where there's money, there's finance. Where there's finance, there's somebody that works in some form of finance capacity. And that should be somebody you maybe can have a conversation with and just say, I'm studying, doing my ACCA, and I'm just wondering, how you got into the finance, and have those conversations. I don't like networking. I don't like it. But you do realise when you're working in and amongst people, you are kind of networking. I mean, the organisation I'm contracting in, I network with consultants all the time. And actually, I didn't realise that's what I was doing. But when someone says, if you ever need a job, here's my card, or here's my number, here's my email address, that's a form of networking. So sometimes we have to use the situations we're in as well to gain that knowledge. And I really want to challenge you that you need to, if you're looking at your career as a project, then you need to have some proactive strategies in place to achieve this pivot into the finance sector in 2021. Aside from the academics and the education, what else do you feel that you need to do? What else do you need to be proactive in to open opportunities so that you can now start entering interviews and having those interviews? And what I don't want you to do is walk into interviews. So once you've done your CV and it's amazing, you get invited to interview, then you say, I don't have much experience. You need to big yourself up. Even in and amongst what you're doing now, there are transferable skills, and they may not be clear to you as a support worker how you can use some of those skills in the finance sector, but they're there. The finance sector isn't just about finances. It's also about how you deal with stakeholders. Yeah. Whoever you're a support worker to is your stakeholder. And you said you specialise with young children. The young children are your stakeholders. So when asked the question in an interview, how would you deal with a difficult stakeholder? You are able to say, you don't have to say, I work with young children. You can say, the stakeholders I work with are quite challenging because of X, Y, Z, and it's meant that I've had to devise a way of kind of appealing to their better nature to be able to do. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think sometimes some of the answers are in and amongst where we are. And you will be able to pivot. I believe you will be able to. And I'm wishing you all the best of luck. And thank you so much for your dilemma and emailing across and for purchasing the CV Masterclass. Hi Toya, happy belated New Year. I hope that you and your loved ones are keeping safe and well. Firstly, thank you for being such a source of wisdom and strength. I have been a part of the Snapchat gang for years now and still refer back to the notes I made at your first Toya Talks live event. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer dilemmas, and I'm happy for you to do so on or off the podcast. I work in the education sector, and like many industries, we have been rocked by the pandemic. Last May 2020, I was told by my trust that I would have to be let go as a teacher from my school through a loophole in my contract due to a lack of funding. I was one of the 15-ish staff at the time. I was aware of the agreement in my contract, and just before we began home learning in March, we was having regular meetings, drafting up a new contract with a September start date. Because of the lengthy period of home learning and the uncertainty of the pandemic, these conversations were halted, and I was hit with the news that I would have to be let go. My line manager was very supportive over this transition period and admitted many times how gutted they were to see me go. After being recognised by the whole school through awards and achievements as having an amazing start to my career, I wasn't happy, but was professional and did manage to find a job elsewhere with a September start. Congratulations. I now work at a very challenging school and once again have been noted many times of my great teaching work and work with the students and talent as an educator. The stress can be high and it has taken a lot out of me personally to move and get settled mid-pandemic. I was contacted by the last school in October asking me to return in January with a higher salary than my current role and room for progression. I turned them down as my current school agreed to match the proposed salary to no avail and also agreed to career progression, also to no avail. I was contacted again this month by my previous school pleading for a September start date as they need a valuable member like me on the team. They would like to begin discussions on that role, would like pay, etc. I love my current team and that my school is aware and supportive of well-being. I also know I hated moving in a pandemic and I'm worried about what it might look like having moved so many times in 1 year. Do you think that my career progression, I should move given how they treated me? And if so, how I secure a contract reflective of my worth? I'm so sorry if this is really long. God bless you. Wow. Wowee wow. Okay, so first of all, I want to say congratulations because it's not easy to kind of be made redundant from a role and then start a new role in a pandemic. I've started a new role in a pandemic and it's not easy because irrespective of the fact I like working remote, it's still, you know, it's still odd, do you know what I mean, to start a new role and get to know people, and it really does force you to really use your interpersonal skills. Some people don't have them skills. So I want to say congratulations. I also want to say that your old place, you know, they didn't want to let you go and, you know, things happened. But I think what is really, really clear for me is that, you know, the halting of your contract and things like that, I think the loophole that allowed them to get rid of you is the loophole you make sure doesn't exist in your new contract if you were to go back. I think that you need to write some lessons learned that you learned from your old role. And I get the impression from you, you want to go back to your old role. I get that feeling, and I think it's further exacerbated by the fact that the organisation you are in now said that they would, as my current role, agreed to match the proposed salary to no avail. So they wanted to match. So your current role, you told your current role that you were being offered your old role back. And basically what you're saying to me in this email is that they said they'll match the salary and haven't done it. And then in terms of career progression, they said that they have those discussions and agree and they haven't done it. So my thing is this, and I have this saying that I say, I only have allegiance to my own career. I have an allegiance to myself, first and foremost. I don't have allegiances to organisations because, like you've seen in your situation, an organisation will use a loophole to get rid of you. Some of them don't even find a loophole. They'll just get rid of you. They'll tell you your job no longer exists. Believe me, I've advised many in that situation. I think you need to ask yourself, and I think you're beginning to do that. What is important to you in your career? Is it money? Is it career progression? If you're not getting that where you are, then even if you don't go back to the old place, you'll still end up moving. Because for me, if you've got a plan in terms of what you want for your career, progression has to be top on that plan. And if that's not being met where you are you just then standing still? There's no progression in standing still. That's the second thing. I think the third thing is, you said to me, do you think that for career progression I should move given how they treated me? And if so, how can I secure a contract reflective of my worth? Well, I have the negotiation masterclass. So if you're trying to negotiate more money, you know, you have that tool there. But equally, if you're going back to your old place, you know what things didn't work. Do you understand? So you can have them negotiate in your contract, and you need to be very confident and very vocal about what you want, because they want you. So you already have the leverage, and I think you need to be confident in what you bring, because yes, the way they treated you, but this is what I say, you know, very early on in the podcast episodes, you need to put your emotions to the side and I know it's difficult, especially when you're invested in an organisation, but organisations don't treat you like that because actually, let me take that back. Organisations will treat you like that either because they don't like you or it's just the way the employment system works. It's not always personal, and in this case it can't be because they want you to come back. So it's about understanding what's important to you. The work-life balance, is that important? Holidays, is that important? If you know that you can get that in your old workplace and you can negotiate better terms, then it's important for you to explore that. I mean, what's the worst I can say? No to things, but you've already got a job anyway, and maybe that can build kind of what your next opportunity would look like if it doesn't work out. So I don't think that you should be too hard on yourself. I think that you do want to go back, but I think that you're a bit aggrieved, and I think it's okay to say that. I think you should say it to them. I was really upset that you found a loophole in my contract to let me go, knowing full well I was in the contract negotiations, and but for the pandemic, we would have agreed a new contract, and now you want me to come back. I need you to give me some security in understanding and knowing that coming back means that I am in a secure contract and actually there is a job here for me and there's career progression. So when people say career progression, it's such an ambiguous term. You need to quantify what that career progression is. Is career progression like doing a roadmap as part of your contract and putting that roadmap in? Is career progression, this is where I want to be in 2 years' time and I need you to tell me what I need to do to get to that point and then putting that as a term in the contract? These are things that you need to think about. So I want to say congratulations for being in a situation where you can go back to your old workplace and have more confidence in yourself and the leverage that you have to negotiate better terms and also to negotiate a package that suits you. This is about you and your career. You're clearly great and amazing at what you do, and you need to believe in your own source and understand that, number one, honey, you're in demand, and number two, you can choose what your next step looks like. So there was a young lady in one of the clubhouse rooms, that I was hosting, and she'd shared with us that she is currently working somewhere and she's on probation at the moment. Her boss shouts at her. I think he threatened to slap her or something, if I'm not wrong. And basically it's been really aggressive, and she basically has made a couple of mistakes and he's like shouted at her and things like that. And I basically said to her, you need to put something in writing now because her workload is crazy. And she was telling us about all the post-it notes and just basically being buried in this job, which wasn't what she applied for. It was more than. And she's basically buckling under the pressure. And when I say buckling, I mean making mistakes because of the pressure of the job. But further, because of the pressure of her manager. So I said to her, listen, and I've said this before in other podcast episodes, but I'm going to say it here again. If you want to pass your probation, you need to put certain checkpoints in to make sure that you're sense checking whether you're actually hitting certain milestones that positions you to be able to pass your probation. That's your job. Don't expect your manager to put these things in place for you. So I then dictated a letter that I thought that she, should put together and send to her manager. And I then said to her, why don't you email in hello@toytalks.com? And I'll use the podcast to kind of repeat the letter if I can remember it. So let's call her manager, Kevin. Hi, Kevin. I thought it prudent to send you this email as I note that I did make a couple of mistakes over the last couple of weeks. I wanted it to be highlighted that a lot of the reasons why I'm making these mistakes is because of all the demand that has come through as part of this role. I love this role and I love this organisation and I'm really enjoying and learning a lot here. But in order to enable me to be able to, number one, excel in this job, and number two, to pass my probation, I think it's important that we put in weekly or bi-weekly checkpoints to make sure that I'm coping with the role, and also to give you full visibility of what my workload looks like. I really appreciate everything you have done for me, and I would ask you for your support as I progress in my career. I know that you get very frustrated and often have shouted and gotten very angry when I've made mistakes, and I think that I have internalized this and become very annoyed with myself. But to be proactive and to ensure that I'm actually delivering, and more importantly, I'm delivering confidently, I think it's important that we have a collaborative approach. And therefore, I would ask that not only do we have these check-ins, but there's actually milestones that are met, and where there are issues that they're identified early and worked through. And I would like to do this with you as my line manager, but also as somebody who supports my career. I look forward to hearing from you. Now, I can't remember all the words I used and the things I said on the Friday during my clubhouse, but the way that I've dictated that, and it's constructive, it's very collaborative, it's very forward thinking, it's very supportive. I'm not blaming him, but you're creating an audit trail and making it clear that there are some issues, and not all those issues sit with you. As soon as you write something like that, you're basically putting him in a very difficult position, because you need to understand the same way because I think she didn't want to say certain things about her probation because she didn't want to kind of put it into his mind and but the reality is, darling, you're on probation. Yeah. So sometimes you just got to call it out. Now, if you don't want to, and I said it to you in the clubhouse, you don't have to, but equally it is your responsibility to put them checkpoints in. And you need to understand your probation can be extended, and sometimes that is often worse. It is, because sometimes they extend your probation but not tell you what you would have to do to fully pass your probation. And it is quite demoralizing to not pass your probation. I've had my probation extended before. I was working with a psychotic manager who waited until the last day of my probation to tell me she's extending me. No warning, no nothing. And I had to carry that L as a learning lesson, because had I put the checkpoints in, I would have held her accountable. And then if I had done really well at my checkpoints and she tried to extend it at the end, then I could have challenged that. But I had no leg to stand on, because I hadn't provided myself with enough padding to be able to then, challenge it. But instead, I'd literally played into her hands. And this is a pandemic. This is about keeping your job, because the reality is, you don't know if you're going to pass your probation. You don't. You've got a man threatening you, shouting at you, screaming at you. You're making mistakes. Part of those mistakes is the anxiety of not knowing when he's going to shout at you again. That's not a healthy environment to work in. And all that does is erode at your self-esteem and self-confidence. So what I'm encouraging you to do is take charge of your career and take charge of this job. If this is a job you want to stay in and you have plans for this job, what is it that you're trying to achieve? This needs to be built into your checkpoint. So after you do these checkpoints, and by the grace of God you pass your probation, the next meetings you should be putting in are about progression, if that's what you want and have planned for this role. That's how you take charge of your career. So please let me know how it goes. You send that email in. Obviously tailor it to suit you, but the premise of that email that I've dictated here on the Toy Talks podcast has to remain. The premise of it is we're trying to support you to be able to pass your probation. So I'm going to leave it there in terms of the dilemmas. And I'm going to say thank you so much for all the dilemmas I received. Like, honestly, you guys are the real MVPs, honestly. And thank you for trusting me, with your dilemmas, but more importantly, trusting me and tuning in every week to hear kind of the advice I give, some of the life lessons that I've learned throughout my career, but more importantly, an honest space for us to speak honestly. Something happened on social media recently, and I say recently, but today, and I wanted to talk about it quickly before I end the podcast. So those of you who watch Love Island UK, Yewande, a beautiful black queen who is also an influencer, was accused by Lucy Rose, who was also on Love Island, a white lady, and Lucy Rose accused Yewande of bullying her. And Yewande responded, and I'm going to read her response. Yewande's response was as follows. You refused to call me by my name because it was too hard to pronounce. Now you want to say I bullied you? Bullied. When I read that, I thought to myself, you know what? I am going to have to touch on it quickly. It's really exhausting, and I know we're all really exhausted of white women weaponizing the word bullying. But they're actions that seek to erode our confidence, seek to attack us and our blackness, making them uncomfortable. That's not bullying. That is something that sits within them. That's got nothing to do with us. How many times have we heard, "Oh, is your name this?" or someone trying to change your name? But do you know how insulting it is to say to somebody, "Your name is too hard to pronounce. Can I call you something else?" Not only is it insulting, But it stinks of white privilege. It stinks of white entitlement. And it also stinks of white fragility, where there are white women that genuinely, and it's racist white women, because undertones of intolerance, where you can come to somebody and say, can I call you something else? Or because your name's too hard to say. But what I don't understand is, why do you think that you can't call me the name that my family gave me, and I should give you an exemption because you can't be bothered to pronounce it properly? And I'm so glad that you one day responded, because it's undertones of racism that I can't deal with. Because I promise you, if your one day's name was Sally, Lucy would have no problem pronouncing your one day's name. If your one day's name was Beverly, Lucy would have no problem. Why is it that when we don't make allowances, that we're called bullies, but if we make allowances, then we're palatable? My job is not to be palatable to racist white people. My job is to stand in my blackness and stand in my femininity and stand in who I am, irrespective of how uncomfortable it makes people feel. So what I'm going to do is, I know that I have a lot of non-black people that listen to the podcast, and some to educate themselves. And I'm going to say this, as part of that educational roadmap that you're on, that journey that you're on, understand that it's not black people's roles to make you comfortable in pronouncing our names, or to make you comfortable around difficult conversations about what happens within the black community, and make you comfortable having those difficult conversations about racism, because they're not difficult to us. It's difficult to you because it scratches the foundations of racism you seek to protect. And as black women, I'm so sorry, we are tired. Some of us are tired. Some of us are tired of accommodating bullshit. So if you're one day who you, Lucy, have accused of bullying, and you think you can just throw that word around like a pack of Skittles, but the real bully is you. Because what you didn't want to reveal is that you've gone to this woman and basically said, can I call you another name because your name is too hard to pronounce? You should be ashamed of yourself. So I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and listening to the Toy Talks podcast. I really hope you found this episode useful. I hope that you've gained some practical skills and knowledge that you didn't have before you listened to this episode. If you know of anyone that can benefit from the podcast platform, please send the podcast to them. Send them an episode. The more we share, the more we learn. The more we learn, the more we grow. The more we grow, the more we create awareness. And the more we create awareness, the more it becomes comfortable having some difficult conversations as black women about things that we have to encounter in the workplace. And I'm hoping that in giving you guys the practical skills, I'll make it a little bit easier. If you want to follow me on social media, if you want to follow my Instagram page, that's my personal Instagram page. My handle is Toya_Washington. If you want to follow the Toya Talks podcast Instagram page, the handle is Toya_Talks. My Twitter handle is Toya_W. My Snapchat handle is Toya Washington, all one word. If you would like to follow me on Clubhouse, my handle is Toya Washington, all one word. If you have a work-related dilemma, please send it to hello@toyatalks.com. If you are interested in any of the masterclasses, and I'm telling you now, my masterclasses are dope. We have the CV masterclass, the interview masterclass. We also have redundancy masterclass, mother and daughter masterclass, and the negotiation masterclass. That's a salary negotiation masterclass. Go ahead, go and have a watch, go and have a listen, go and learn, go and equip yourself with the tools that you need to navigate the world of work safely and light up the path of your success. I'm going to draw this episode to a close, and I'm going to thank you once again for listening. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.